Tissue perfusion. So blood flow through the tissues. It carries oxygen and nutrients to the tissues and organs, and it carries carbon dioxide and waste products away, which is just what I spoke about in the last diagram. It's affected by cardiac output, peripheral resistance, and blood pressure, which is what we've just discussed. So things that can control cardiac output and blood pressure, we've spoken a little bit about autoregulation, and it causes immediate and localized homeostatic adjustments. Then you have neural mechanisms, so that's when the brain can quickly respond to changes at specific sites. And then you have endocrine mechanisms. So endocrine, remember that endocrine organs secrete hormones. Hormones are chemicals that go into the blood, and they are involved in directing long-term changes. So neural and autoregulatory can be more quick, whereas the endocrine ones tend to be long-term. So the control of cardiovascular function, it's controlled by a number of ways. We're going to be looking at the baroreceptors. So baro is barometric pressure, so that's responding to changes in blood pressure. And the other one is the chemoreceptors. So this means that the body is able to respond to changes in the blood, changes in chemical composition, particularly pH, which is the level of acidity and alkalinity, and also the level of dissolved gases, in particular carbon dioxide. So the baroreceptors, the pressure receptors, the stretch receptors are located in the carotid sinuses, and that's the carotid arteries, which are the main blood flow to the brain, and also the aortic sinuses. And the right atrium monitors it at the end of the systemic circulation. So when the blood enters back via the superior and the inferior vena cava, there is a pressure baroreceptor in the right atrium that monitors the blood pressure of that, the pressure of the blood returning. So the baroreceptor reflexes, when blood pressure rises, the cardiovascular centers in the brain, they can decrease cardiac output and cause peripheral vasodilation. When blood pressure falls, the cardiovascular centers can actually increase cardiac output and cause peripheral vasoconstriction. This is all to maintain homeostasis. So let's have a look at this. So on the left-hand side of the diagram, we've got an arrow going up the page which says responses to increase in baroreceptor stimulation. So an increase in pressure. So let's move over to the little red arrow, and that's where we're going to start. So homeostasis has been disturbed and we have a rise in blood pressure. The baroreceptors have been stimulated. They're the stretch receptors. We know where they're located, and they've picked up that there is a rise in blood pressure. The cardio-inhibitory centers have been stimulated, and what they do is that they decrease cardiac output. The vasomotor centers have been inhibited, which means that the blood vessels can dilate, and the overall result of that, slowing the cardiac output, the amount of blood coming out of the heart, and then increasing the diameter of the vessels, results in a lowering of blood pressure, and blood pressure returns to normal. What happens then if the baroreceptors pick up a response which says, okay, now we've got a fall in blood pressure? So you can see on the left of the diagram we've got the arrow dropping. Now the body is responding to a fall in pressure. So again, we start at the red arrow. So homeostasis has again been disturbed, and we've got a fall in blood pressure. The baroreceptors pick this up and they've been inhibited. What happens is that they work on the vasomotor centers, the cardio-acceleratory centers have been stimulated, and the cardio-inhibitory centers have been inhibited. What that means is that the heart will beat faster, and there will be an increase in cardiac output, and also the blood vessels will begin to constrict. Both of these things cause a rise in blood pressure, and again homeostasis is restored and normal blood pressure is returned. So the chemoreceptor reflexes, so they're located in the carotid bodies and the aortic bodies as well, and they the central chemoreceptors is located in the medulla oblongata, which is in part of the brain. And that monitors subtle changes in cerebrospinal fluid. Remember, well, the brain is bathed in cerebrospinal fluid. It has a thin film of solution around the outside of the brain, and then within the brain there are what are called ventricles as well, where the cerebrospinal fluid is moving continually, providing again nourishment and removal of waste products. And the medulla oblongata controls respiratory function as well, and it also controls blood flow to the brain. So it picks up changes in pH, so that's acidity and alkalinity. It picks up changes in the levels of oxygen and carbon dioxide concentration. And it's produced by coordinating cardiovascular and respiratory activities. So here we've got a rise. So now we're looking at the chemoreceptor reflexes. So on the left-hand side of the diagram, we've got the arrow going up, showing you that there is an increase in carbon dioxide levels, a decrease in the pH, and oxygen levels. All right. So if we start at the red arrow again, homeostasis has again been disturbed, and we've got increased carbon dioxide, lowering pH, and lowering of oxygen level has been picked up by the cerebrospinal fluid, so at the medulla oblongata. So the chemoreceptors have been stimulated and we get a reflex response. It affects the cardio-acceleratory centers. They've been stimulated so that the heart will beat faster. The cardio-inhibitory centers have been stimulated, and the vasomotors have been stimulated. What happens is that we get the respiratory center in the medulla oblongata also has been stimulated, and that results in an increase in respiratory rate, so the person breathes faster. The cardiac response is there an increase in cardiac output, so the heart beats faster, and the vasoconstriction occurs in the blood vessels. This all restores homeostasis by decreasing the carbon dioxide level, because as the person breathes faster, they exhale more carbon dioxide, which causes a rise in the pH, so it makes it more alkaline, and of course breathing faster will cause an increase in oxygen levels, and these levels are picked up in the blood and the CSF by the medulla oblongata. So homeostasis is now restored back to normal range of pH between 7.35 and 7.45. Normal range of oxygen and carbon dioxide is present in the blood and the cerebrospinal fluid. So thought processes and emotional states can actually elevate blood pressure as well. And cardiac stimulation and vasoconstriction. So if someone has been given very bad news, what can happen is that they can faint. Right? Also, if someone has been given very good news, then their blood pressure can rise because the adrenaline has been secreted and their cardiac output will be increased that way. So hormones and cardiovascular regulation. Hormones have short-term and long-term effects on the cardiovascular regulation. For example, adrenaline and noradrenaline are secreted from an area above the kidneys called the adrenal medulla, and this stimulates cardiac output and peripheral vasoconstriction. But there's a limit to how much adrenaline can be secreted. So here we've got an increase in blood pressure and volume. So if we start at normal blood pressure and then we move to our little red arrow, for some reason doesn't seem to be on this diagram, so we'll move it to where it says homeostasis is disturbed and we have a rise in blood pressure. So here we have natriuretic peptides are released by the heart, and this causes a response. It causes an increase in sodium to be lost in the urine, an increase in water to be lost in urine, a reduced thirst, and inhibition of antidiuretic hormone, aldosterone, epinephrine or adrenaline and noradrenaline are released, and peripheral vasodilation results. These combined effect reduce blood volume. homeostasis is returned and you have decreasing blood pressure.